I am 74 years old, and I am going to tell you something today that nobody in your life is honest enough to say to your face. If you are a woman over 60, looking for love with an older man, a man your age or close to it, I want you to sit down and listen carefully, because I learned everything I am about to tell you the hard way. Across 14 years of hoping and waiting and adjusting myself and making excuses for behavior I should have walked away from in the first conversation. My name is Dorothy Ellen Marsh. I was widowed at 58 when my husband Gerald passed from a stroke on a Tuesday morning in 2009 in our kitchen on Pembroke Avenue while I was pouring his coffee. 31 years of marriage, gone before the coffee finished brewing. I spent 2 years grieving properly. Then my sister said the words that started everything that followed. "Dorothy, you are still young. You deserve company. There are good men out there." She meant well. She was not entirely wrong. There are good men out there. But here is what nobody tells you about dating an older man when you yourself are no longer young. The same qualities that made older men seem steady and desirable and safe to you at 35 become something else entirely at 65. And by the time you understand that distinction, you have already paid for the lesson in full. Let me show you exactly what I mean. The first man I dated after Gerald was named Frank, 68 years old, retired school principal, silver-haired, well-spoken, opened doors and pulled out chairs, and called when he said he would call. My sister was delighted. My daughters were cautiously optimistic. I was quietly hopeful in the way a woman is when she has been lonely long enough that hope starts to feel like a personality trait. Frank and I dated for 11 months. He was attentive and warm for the first 4. Then something shifted so gradually, I almost missed it happening. He stopped asking about my life and started narrating his own. Every dinner became a detailed account of his career, his adult children's failures, his late wife's shortcomings, delivered with the casual confidence of a man who had never once been asked to examine his own behavior. I sat across from him at restaurant tables in good restaurants I had dressed carefully for, and listened, and listened, and listened. Because I had been raised in a generation that confused a man's talking with a man's presence. One evening, after 3 hours of Frank's uninterrupted monologue about a property dispute with his neighbor, I drove home alone and sat in my car outside my house on Pembroke Avenue and asked myself one honest question. When was the last time Frank asked me a single question about my life? I could not remember. And that was the first hard truth about dating older men that nobody warns you about. Many of them stopped being curious about other people a very long time ago. They are not looking for a partner. They are looking for an audience. After Frank, I took 8 months for myself, walked every morning on Pembroke Avenue, planted roses in the back garden, had dinners with my daughters without apologizing for not having a man beside me at the table. It was the most peaceful 8 months of my post-Gerald life. Then I met Raymond at a community dinner organized by the local church on Birchwood Street. 71 years old, widower for 3 years, quiet in the way I had mistaken for depth one too many times before, but mistook again. Raymond was different from Frank on the surface. He asked questions, listened when I answered, remembered small details I mentioned once, and referenced them weeks later. I thought I had finally found what I was looking for. We dated for nearly 2 years. Then Raymond's youngest son got divorced and moved back into Raymond's house, and Raymond disappeared. Not dramatically, not with an argument, just gradually, slowly, the way water lowers in a glass without you watching. Less available, more distracted, canceling plans with apologies that became shorter and less specific over time. I finally asked him directly one evening over coffee at his kitchen table, "Raymond, what is happening with us?" He looked genuinely confused by the question, said he thought we were fine, said he was just very focused on his son right now, and I should understand that. I did understand it. What I did not understand was why understanding it meant accepting that I had quietly become the lowest priority in my own relationship. And that was the second hard truth. Many older men have spent decades in relationships where their needs came first by default. They are not cruel about it. They simply do not notice they are doing it, which in some ways is worse. After Raymond, I made myself a promise. I wrote it on a note card and taped it the mirror in my bedroom, where Dorothy, stop mistaking a man's availability for a man's suitability. I kept that promise for 14 months. Then I met Howard at a book club my neighbor Margaret dragged me to on a cold Wednesday evening in February. 66 years old, recently retired accountant, funny in the dry, understated way that takes a moment to land. We talked for 3 hours that first evening about books and cities and the particular loneliness of Sunday afternoons when you live alone after decades of not doing so. It felt like recognition, like two people identifying something in each other that the rest of the room could not quite see. I allowed myself to hope again. Howard and I dated for 7 months. He was attentive, present, interested. Then one evening he sat across from me at the kitchen table on Pembroke Avenue with a particular expression I had not seen on his face before. Careful, rehearsed, apologetic in advance. He said he had been doing a lot of thinking, said he valued me enormously, said I was one of the most remarkable women he had ever known. I recognized the architecture of what was coming before he finished the sentence. He was not ready for something serious. He had recently reconnected with his ex-wife. He hoped I would understand. I sat across from Howard at my own kitchen table and understood something that had nothing to do with him specifically. I had spent 7 months becoming available to a man who was never fully available to me. He had been auditioning the idea of his ex-wife the entire time I was sitting across from him, believing I had finally found solid ground. And that was the third hard truth. Many older men are not looking for something new. They are looking for something familiar, and you will not know which one you are until you have already invested everything you were trying to protect. I want to stop here for a moment because I know what some of you are thinking. Dorothy, these are just 3 bad experiences. Not every older man is like this. You were simply unlucky. And you are partially right. Not every older man is like Frank or Raymond or Howard. But here is what 14 years of trying taught me that I wish someone had said clearly and without apology before I started. The dating pool for women over 60 is not the same pool it was at 35. At 35, you were choosing between men who were still forming themselves, still capable of being redirected, still willing to be shaped by a relationship. At 65, you are meeting the finished product. What you see in the first 3 months is not the preview, it is the feature. And the fourth hard truth is this: many older men who are widowed or divorced carry the blueprint of their last relationship like a template they intend to reuse. They are not looking for a new dynamic. They are looking for a familiar function in a new person. They want what their last relationship provided: the cooking, the companionship, the someone to call when the day was difficult, without necessarily offering what their last relationship required from them in return. You will recognize this pattern approximately 6 months too late, every time. Then there is the fifth hard truth, the one I wish most desperately someone had told me at 58, standing in my kitchen on Pembroke Avenue, the morning Gerald died. The loneliness you feel after losing a long marriage is real, and it is deep, and it deserves to be honored. But it is also the most dangerous state in which to make decisions about men, because loneliness does not evaluate clearly. It simply reaches, and whatever it finds first feels like exactly what it was looking for. I reached 3 times, and each time I found something that felt briefly like solid ground before revealing itself as something considerably less stable. I have one more thing to tell you, the most important thing, the thing that took me 14 years and 3 relationships and more quiet Friday evenings than I care to count to finally understand. It is coming in the next part, and I want you to stay for it, because it changed everything. The most important thing I learned across 14 years of trying was not about men, it was about me. I had spent those 14 years measuring my own worth by whether a man was willing to stay beside me. Every time Frank talked over me, I wondered what I was doing wrong. Every time Raymond made me a low priority, I asked myself what I could adjust to make myself more worth prioritizing. Every time Howard sat across from me thinking about someone else, I questioned whether I was interesting enough, compelling enough, present enough. I handed 3 ordinary and somewhat self-absorbed men the power to define what I was worth, and they used it without even realizing they were using it, because I offered it so completely and so consistently that none of them ever had to ask. That is the final hard truth, and it is the one that matters most. After Howard, I stopped dating entirely. Not in defeat, in decision. I took the note card off my bedroom mirror, wrote a new one. Dorothy, you are not a gap that needs filling. You are a life that is already complete. I planted more roses in the back garden, started walking further every morning. Had my daughters over for Sunday dinners that became the best part of every week. Built a life so full and so genuinely mine that the absence of a man in it stopped feeling like something missing and started feeling like something chosen. I am 74 years old. I have calloused gardening hands and a kitchen that smells like good coffee, and Sunday afternoons I no longer dread. And I want to leave every woman over 60 who is listening to this with the only advice that actually matters. Do not shrink yourself to fit inside someone else's availability. Do not confuse a man's presence with a man's investment. Do not let loneliness make the decision that your judgment should be making. And do not, under any circumstances, mistake a man's need for an audience, a man's search for a template, or a man's unfinished business with his past for the love you actually deserve. You spent 60 years becoming who you are. That is not a consolation prize for the relationships that did not work. That is the whole point. You are not starting over. You are finally, completely arriving. I spent 14 years shrinking myself for men who never once asked me to grow. If this reached something inside you, please subscribe, because you deserve to hear the truth more often. Tell me in the comments, are you currently adjusting yourself for someone who has never once adjusted anything for you?